Alright, so in this video I'm going to cover moving files up to your server so that your web page can be accessible online, and how to continue to edit and manage your files when you're publishing them in that way. So let's say I've got my project that I've been working on my local computer. Okay, so to this point I've been just looking at the files in Firefox, editing them in Atom, etc. Okay, so I'm working here, I'm making changes, I get rid of these exclamation points, I refresh, I'm doing this. Okay, I'm ready to publish my site to the internet. So to do this, what we need to do are move your files to a remote computer called a server that's on all the time. And earlier you should have purchased server space and a domain name, and we've talked about what that means and what you're buying in that situation. So to move the files, we use a program called an FTP client. FTP stands for File Transfer Protocol. I use one called Fetch that you may or may not be able to get free through the university. There's one called CyberDuck, DUCK, that should be free. There's one called FileZilla, which is free. If you're on Windows, you'll probably want to use FileZilla, and I'll put links to these in Slack. So when you open the FTP program, there will be a way for you to create a new connection or connect to a server. And to do that, you need some information that should have come in an email from Reclaim Hosting or through whatever hosting provider you have. You should be given an FTP username and password. And you'll use that to fill this out. The host name will often be sent to you in that email as well. Okay, so my URL is byislands.info, but the host name that I connect to is different. Okay, so if you're on Reclaim Hosting, it should look something like this. It might not be Pavement, it might be something else. You've got a username that it's given you, and you've got a password that it's given you. You also will change this depending on what server you're connecting to. So for Reclaim Hosting, it wants us to be connecting over SFTP, which is just a secured version of FTP. That'll change by the host that you're using. But if we're doing Reclaim Hosting, this is how your setup will look. There's also an option on all of these programs to basically save your configuration, so that you can create a shortcut here. So you should do that so that you only ever have to type this once. Once you hit connect, this window is going to act just like a Finder window on your computer. Okay, but it's like a Finder window on a remote computer. So the first time you log in, you should see something like this with a bunch of stuff. We're going to ignore all of this, and the only thing we're ever going to look at is this public HTML folder. So never delete this other stuff, but always just immediately go to your public HTML folder. Okay. At this point, you've probably got some files in here. If you've just registered your hosting, it's kind of like a default site. You can just delete all of that. So you can delete the things that are inside your public HTML folder to start. Now, let's say that I've been working on project 1. Okay, so all of these files together are my site, and I want them to be accessible at my domain name. All I'm going to do is take these files and drag them into my public HTML folder. Okay? Every time I do this, I'm going to take all my files from my computer and put them to the remote server. Okay? So now if I go to my URL, I have the same thing that is on my local computer. Okay? So now let's say I want to make some changes. I'm in Atom, I'm working, I want some stars here, I save, I come back, and I refresh locally. I'm going to see my changes. Okay, so this is still the file that's on my computer, and if I look at the file that's on my server, obviously I don't see any changes because it's pulling the file that's on my server. Okay, so another way of looking at that is this file that's on my computer is now has been changed from this file that I uploaded earlier. So once I get this to a place where I want to upload and publish it again, all I'm going to do is grab all of these files, drag them up here. It might ask you if you want to replace the files, it might not. You always want to replace the files, and the reason I tell you to bring all your files up is so that way I don't have to worry about which files I edited here. I can just know that this version of my website is good, and I want to overwrite this version with it, okay? One thing that you might want to do, or you might be tempted to do, but please don't do it, is when you're coming in here to your public HTML folder, you might say, okay, well, I want to put up my project 1 site. I'm just going to drag this project 1 folder here, okay? That's not going to work because if I come here and I refresh, I'm not going to get the site. And what it's doing is, by default, when it's just your domain name, it goes to your public HTML folder and it looks for a file called index.html. There's no file called index.html here, so it's not going to return your website. You might do something like this, put it inside a folder if it's like you might have a project that's a web project that you want to put up and you want it to be accessible at something like this. So you could have this, and you could then link to this file. But if you're working on your home page that you just want to be at your domain name, you want to only bring the files that are inside the folder and not the folder. All right, so really simple. Again, to review, I'm working locally on my computer. All right, I'm on my computer. This is a file that's on my computer. I make my changes in Atom. I save. I refresh. I go back and forth, save, refresh, save, refresh. Get it to a point where I want to publish it. I connect over FTP to my server. I should only have to enter my password and my username once. Everything should be saved. Once I'm on my server, I immediately go to public HTML. I don't touch any of these other things. And if I'm making edits to this site that's in my public HTML folder, all I'm going to do is take all my files for that site, drag them in here, let it overwrite, and then I can check that it worked.